My husband's father, or rather the head of a long-established business that has been running since Edo era, has built it up over 3 generations. They are consistently in the top 100 of the wealthiest families, managing several companies. He is highly respected not for his wealth, but clearly for his character. Given his age, he recently reduced his workload by moving from CEO to chairman, cutting back on office hours. As for my MIL, she has always been a housewife and seemingly never had to work hard. Despite being in an arranged marriage, she grew up pampered and cooks properly according to my husband. She is always prying into her finances since she is quite stingy. However, my husband is a typical mama's boy, always siding with her and leaving me to endure. No matter how wrong she is, he says mom has always supported dad. She's like a pillar at home. But seriously, her support was through the housekeepers hired with the money my father-in-law made, doing everything from cooking, cleaning, to car maintenance with a dedicated mechanic. My MIL is frankly quite free-spirited, able to do whatever she wants whenever she wants. I almost said this out loud but stopped myself. We have 1 son. My MIL is very kind to him, a stark contrast to how she treats me. And inevitably, if something negative happens, it's always my fault. For instance, when my son got a 4 out of 5 in math at school, she blamed me. Did he take after you? Being bad at math. It's a mother's responsibility to send him to tutoring. True, I'm not great at calculations and my husband is even worse. But I just agreed to look into tutoring without mentioning that. We live in a separate house on the same property, so she often comes over to check if I'm cleaning properly and then leaves. The house is relatively new, so she always says, keep it clean, it's still new. We do pay rent, though it's more like the cost of ice cream compared to market rates. So I can't really complain. I'm always grateful to my father-in-law, who never fusses about such things.
He just said, I can't give it for free, but feel free to use it.
There are 2 other houses on the property. One is where my sister-in-law lives. She's very kind to me, perhaps taking after her father. She's been single since her divorce with no intention of remarrying. My sister-in-law has been single since her divorce years ago, with no intention of remarrying. She once worked as my father-in-law's secretary, but now manages one of his companies. It's a testament to her intelligence. She doesn't get along well with my mother-in-law. She's always seen my mother-in-law as a do-nothing woman, leading her to ensure she wasn't perceived the same way. And she completed her education, even studying abroad. She's the complete opposite of my mother-in-law. Then one day, we got news that my father-in-law had a stroke. I left work immediately and rushed to the hospital. Apparently I arrived first, followed by my sister-in-law a minute later, and then my husband and mother-in-law showed up 50 minutes after that. The doctor said my father-in-law had a stroke and was now paralyzed and unable to move. This meant he would need 24-hour care. I couldn't believe it. He was so active just the day before. But then my mother-in-law turned to me and said, "You have the most free time, right? Please help take care of him." She, who never lifted a finger, was telling me to help with caregiving. But my father-in-law interjected, "I'm fine. We can hire a caregiver if needed." My mother-in-law quickly responded, "No, dear. We already spend enough on housekeepers. It'll cost us more." She then said, "You guys live in that house for free, so it's only fair." But her gaze was fixed on me, not my husband. I decided to care for my father-in-law, seeing it as a way to repay him for all he's done. He can't move, but he is stable and still has clear speech. So every day, someone from his secretary to his lawyer, Mr. Hashimoto, to company executives would come for work. I visited daily, juggling my work and son, and did the bare minimum to support my father-in-law. My sister-in-law also came occasionally, helping me or taking over. Meanwhile, my husband did nothing.
He hardly visited, maybe once a week, and just half listened to my updates. He'd ask, "How's Dad?"
I'd reply, "Stable, but you should visit more."
He'd brush it off. "I'm too busy with work."
What kind of excuse is that? I thought, but I didn't say it out loud. 3 years passed. I continued caring for my father-in-law, enduring my mother-in-law's snide remarks and growing increasingly frustrated with my husband. One day my father-in-law called me over.
"Could you sit here for a minute?" he asked, pointing to a chair next to his bed.
I sat down and he began, "You've taken such good care of me for 3 years, even though I'm not your real father. My wife and son hardly come and see me, but I know it's my fault. I spoiled them. I want you to have this." He handed me an envelope. Then he said, "Don't show this to anyone. You should divorce my son."
Handed me an envelope and said, "Do not show this to anyone. You should divorce my son."
No, do it. And make sure you secure custody of your son. Understand?
I had once discussed divorce with my sister-in-law.
Perhaps she had told Phil about it. At that moment, I couldn't fathom why Phil brought up such a topic suddenly, but it all became clear later. I returned home and began my usual routine of laundry and preparing dinner. That night, after my husband and son had gone to sleep, I opened the letter. It was typed with FIL's handwritten signature and seal at the end, and even had the stamp of his lawyer. The letter felt profoundly significant.
It read, "If I pass away, go see my longtime lawyer, Mr. Hashimoto. I've told him everything. Go through with the divorce."
Mr. Hashimoto will take care of the custody arrangements. If anything happens to me, contact him immediately. Don't worry about a funeral. I've informed Mr. Stewart about that too. And finally, thank you for all these years. I regret having you take care of me. Once I'm gone, you should be free. Move out and live with your child. This gave me an uneasy feeling. The next day, I met with my sister-in-law and shared everything with her. She revealed, "I went to see the doctor yesterday. Apparently Dad doesn't have long left. He instructed me not to tell Mom or my brother because Mom might do something strange with Dad's money. He seemed to know his time was short, and that's why he gave you that letter. He even discussed his funeral with me, telling me how he wanted it handled instead of a traditional service. So if anything happens, follow his instructions. I will abide by Dad's wishes too." I listened to her with tears streaming down my face. I decided to get 2 divorce forms from the city office right away. But the inevitable happened sooner than expected. My sister-in-law called my husband to inform us that Phil had just passed away. We hurried to Ephile's house. There we found my sister-in-law and the doctor. Mill had not returned yet, still being out. I was truly astounded. Her own husband had passed, and she was nowhere to be found. I immediately contacted Mr. Stewart as instructed. He said, "My deepest condolences. It's a great loss. I'll visit you tomorrow." Finally, Mill came back. Upon seeing me, she said, "You should start packing up. You can't live in that house anymore."
My husband asked Mom, "I can stay, right?"
I was struck by his use of "I" in his question. Without responding to my husband, Mill asked to be left alone with me. We heard sounds of drawers being opened and closed inside. What was Mill doing? After about 10 minutes, she emerged from the room. My sister-in-law then said, "If you're looking for the will, Mr. Stewart has it." Indeed, Mill had been searching for the will. Mill wasn't by FIL's side, she was searching his room. The next day, as promised, Mr. Stewart came over, and everyone was gathered, including my son, 3 housekeepers, and Mr. Owen, who was FIL's right-hand man. Mr. Stewart made everyone sit and unfolded a white sheet of paper, apparently FIL's will.
Firstly, the chairman sold 15 of his 18 companies the day before.
The remaining 3 are to be managed by Mr. Owen. The next chairman will be his daughter, he announced. Mill exclaimed, "What? Why are you skipping me and going straight to the child?" Mr. Stewart continued reading.
His son's role remains unchanged. He should follow Mr. Owen and support his sister in growing the 3 companies.
My husband remained silent, lips pursed.
Mr. Owen, here are the documents. This is the new contract. Please sign if you agree and wait for further instructions from the new chairman.
Mr. Owen bowed deeply and left.
Next, for the 3 housekeepers, the chairman has left $10,000 each. Your employment here ends today. He thanks you for your service.
The housekeepers were in tears. Mr. Stewart handed them 3 brown envelopes and encouraged them to leave after thanking FIL. The housekeepers also expressed their gratitude to FIL, deeply bowing their heads before leaving. Mill was furious. What does this mean? Who will do the household chores if the housekeepers are gone? Despite her outburst, it's understandable. Mr. Stewart continued.
The chairman has also sold this property. You, madam, will move to an apartment arranged by the chairman with a provision of $200,000. The apartment is furnished already. Here's the address and keys.
Mill became even more enraged.
Why should I live in an apartment? Enough of this.
My sister-in-law intervened, let's hear everything, and asked Mr. Stewart to continue. To the son, please sign this. Mr. Stewart handed him a document. It was a divorce paper, with my details already filled in. Fael had prepared all this.
What's this about? Predictably, my husband turned to me. What is this?
I firmly said, I've been thinking about this for a while. I didn't say anything until your father passed away. Please, let's get divorced. I'll take care of our son.
Why a divorce? What are you talking about?
I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. You and your mother can't be part of my future life.
I was resolute. Mr. Stewart continued reading the will.
While I let you do as you pleased and never restrained you as I worked, you never once said, I will be by your side when I fell ill. Instead, you pushed my care on to others, treating me like an object. You always worried about money. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more attention because of my work.
Therefore, no need for a funeral. Let me pass quietly. Tell my son please divorce her. She doesn't deserve to be trapped in our family. Give her and her child their freedom. Let them live as they wish. You no longer need to take care of me, your mother, or the family. Please do as she asks. My husband was shocked.
Finally, regarding my business assets and the proceeds from their sale.
1/10 is for the 3 companies my daughter will manage. The rest, Mr. Stewart will donate to orphanages and 5 charities related to Aging Society. This concludes all business and financial dealings of our family and my estate. Mille was crestfallen, her face hidden, as if her soul had left her. She slowly stood up and disappeared into her room. Then my husband silently signed the divorce papers on the table and left without a word. Only sister-in-law Mr. Stewart and I remained in Fael's room. Mr. Stewart handed me an envelope.
This is for you from the chairman. He asked me not to give it in front of everyone. He said bowing and leaving.
Sister-in-law suggested we have tea at her house, so I followed her. We talked about many things. She seemed genuinely exhausted. It's understandable. She has lost her beloved father. I'm grateful to have met this family, especially sister-in-law and Phil. Now my son and I can live without Mael. That's the only good thing about this marriage. I returned home to pack with my son. My husband, now ex-husband, was not there. We didn't have much to take. My son started packing his room. I realized I hadn't opened Fael's letter yet. Alone, I unfolded it and was speechless. Phil wrote, "By the time you read this, you'll be divorced. Thank you for taking care of me all this time. Use this for your and your child's future. Should be enough for a single mother. Do not tell anyone and go to this place. Contact Mr. Stewart if you need help." There was another paper and 2 house keys. Apparently they were for our new home. I looked at the paper. It said $1 million with my name on it. What? How? I was overwhelmed and couldn't understand it all. I couldn't organize my thoughts. It meant that Phil had planned to transfer $1 million into my account upon his passing. And he also gave me a house for free. It was unbelievable. Throughout my marriage, I experienced the unpleasant treatment and words from Mill, and my husband was a useless and overly mother-dependent husband who never took my side. Despite that, I just genuinely cared for the people who mattered. And after just enduring 3 years of this, I was overwhelmed with tears at the outcome. I finished moving and decided to start a part-time job. I worked only during school hours. I made new friends and occasionally stayed in touch with sister-in-law and exchanged updates. Mill ended up in a nursing home. She chose it after feeling lonely and overwhelmed living alone in the apartment. My ex-husband decided to live alone in a company house. He said it was convenient and saved on commuting costs. He seems to be working with sister-in-law and Mr. Owen. 15 years of marriage was like a lifetime with my in-laws. But the last 3 years were unforgettable, and I still visit the grave every month. My son, now a high school student, occasionally keeps in touch with his father. He might end up working with his father and sister-in-law in the future. I felt like a continuation of an era on a peaceful afternoon.